Thank you for joining the Australian Institute of Insider's Threat, where we're going to explore human behaviour, diving into the shades of grey, where we're examining the fine line of right and wrong. Hi, I'm Boz Fisher, and once again we have the mighty Peter Navra.
Thank you.
In this video, we'll explore the line between acceptable and suspicious behaviour, examining how subtle actions can shift from being perceived as normal to raising concerns. So, let's define what we mean by acceptable behaviour.
Acceptable behaviour is any behaviour that sits within the understood boundaries or the formal boundaries, and that has a consistency about it. There's two factors for that. Are we inside of the boundaries, and do we consistently stay inside of those boundaries? But there's also a second factor, which is are we consistent in the way that we stay inside of those boundaries?
Yep.
So we might be very methodical, we might be very thoughtful about things, and the next day we come in and we're jumping. We're still in the boundaries, we're still being friendly.
Yes.
But hang on, that's not consistent.
Correct. Okay. So the word consistency is
it's the second part of that. Yes.
Yeah. So what makes someone go from being from acceptable behaviour or crossing the line to becoming then suspicious?
So it is definitely moving outside of the established baseline, if I want to use that word, of behaviour that people have come to know and love, I suppose. And all of a sudden people become different. So they might become secretive, they might become closed.
Yes.
They may do things that in a different way.
Yeah. Are there sort of common triggers or signs that show that this person has gone from sort of what we deem as acceptable behaviour to suspicious behaviour?
Absolutely, and there's subtle signs as well too. So people who are normally within a social circle may expand or move social circles. They may just close down entirely.
Yeah.
So their social behaviour inside of that environment is definitely a part of it. Also the way with which they approach work, and the way with which they manage their time as well too. In a previous video I mentioned, suddenly this particular person is staying late. Okay, one time late beyond, when closing time has been and gone, that might be understood. But now it becomes 2 or 3 times a week for the last 3 weeks. So this can become a little suspicious.
Yeah.
So anything that's out of the bound.
Yeah. So when we look at, from an external, when we look at a person's behaviour, we are perceiving their behaviour.
Yes.
But my behaviour is going to be different than yours.
Correct.
How much of that impacts what happens and how that person is being perceived as either acceptable or suspicious?
Yes. And that's what I'm talking about, baseline. So you do things differently to the way I do things.
Correct.
I may have a different energy about the way I do certain things, but you know that and you expect that of me.
Correct.
And likewise from you. Now, if all of a sudden that changes and you suddenly become this amazing party animal,
yeah.
I go, this is different.
Yeah. But could there be a situation whereby, for example, I see this person as suspicious, but you don't?
Correct. Yes. That is definitely part and parcel of it. Then it becomes, how has that person been behaving all of the time? So some person may see a change as not suspicious at all.
Yes, correct.
Perhaps they have other information that other people don't, whereas other people go, that's odd.
Yes.
Willie's not behaving the same way.
Correct. Are there sort of like lines in the sand, or what we call sometimes like red flags, that straight away say, okay, this person has crossed a line?
Yeah, one of the most powerful red flags is when people become secretive. To give you an example, okay, so it's your spouse's birthday, and you want to get the most amazing gift, but you need to take some time off, you need to make phone calls, you need to do this. Your spouse is going to pick up that you're doing things differently, suspiciously. All right. Now, in the context of birthday, that's understood. Perhaps your spouse understands. Yeah, it's my birthday
Yes,
coming up.
yes, yes.
Now, translate that into a work context, right? Not necessarily, and there's no birthday. There's no reasonable reason for a change of behaviour. All of a sudden, people start behaving in a secretive or in a closed kind of manner where they're holding things close to their chest.
Yes.
Then it's a good idea to have a look at that.
Yeah. How does maybe a cultural background or societal differences play sort of an impact role in terms of us determining whether a person is behaving as acceptable or suspicious?
Yeah. It comes down to how they've always been behaving. I think in the previous video I mentioned that one of the things with a particular culture, the person I was speaking with never looked you in the eye when they were talking. They always looked to the side, which in their culture was a sign of respect.
Yeah, yeah.
So a change in that behaviour might be darting eyes, and that might be, I'm looking for an escape. I really don't like this conversation at all.
Correct.
That's a red flag.
Correct.
So,
but is there a way to sort of dispel, let's call it like a false positive or a false interpretation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You basically sit down with them and say, hey, what's happening? Clarity. Look, daylight is the best.
Yeah. But it could be again going back to the same story where my perception of this person is suspicious. Your perception isn't.
Yes.
How do we dispel the situation or the awareness that this person is legit?
You need to be able to follow through on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there is any hint of suspicion, be very, respectful, but prove to your own self that that is an unfounded suspicion. Now, keeping in mind that there is a phrase called suspicion is raised, which means that something has changed.
Yes.
Something has caused you to raise that suspicion. It's not
Yes.
like that suspicion has been like there all the time.
Correct.
So something raised that suspicion.
Yes.
So what is it? Put your finger on that and then follow that one through.
Yeah. Is it whose line is it to, for example, to tap me on my shoulder and then say, look, friend, you've got the observation, your perception is wrong.
Yeah.
Should be coming from a colleague, should be coming from the manager.
Yeah. I think it's less about your thing is wrong.
Yes.
It's more like, hey, you haven't been yourself lately. What's
Yes.
going on?
Yeah.
And then basically having that empathy, having that engagement, and the person to do that is the one that's sitting right next to you. The person who sits next to you all the time and knows, when your coffee break is, when you have your lunch, how loud you chew when you have your lunch, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's the person who is more than likely to pick stuff up from an organisational point of view. Is what does that person do with it? How do they gently move that forward?
Yeah. So when it comes to helping organisation, do we create like an employee guideline?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of dispelling, what is deemed as suspicious and more focus on what is deemed as acceptable.
Most organisations have community rules.
Yes.
And you can beef those up to the extreme, and they become like legalistic contracts where every single loophole that ever was is now suddenly covered off. People will toss those.
Yep.
Or you can create guidelines and channels to say, look, if there is a problem, if you see a problem,
Yes.
we can take that with sensitivity, advisory,
Correct.
move forward with that.
Correct.
Because if I'm sitting next to you and you're a good mate, I'm not necessarily going to be here to diagnose what's going on.
No, correct.
My concern
correct,
for you
correct.
is what's going on. Okay, your pet mouse is dying. I don't know, something banal.
Yeah.
But this is something that really impacts
Yes,
you.
yes.
Then you can say, hey, just go easy on this one.
Yes.
He's going through a hard time.
Yes.
But that then telegraphs through the organisation and people understand that.
Yes.
And not just the oversight, because oversight implies what are you doing, why are you doing it, but what's happening for that person.
Yeah, I was going to get to that point around oversight. So we've got corporate policies.
Correct.
Right? And by all accounts, corporate policies basically tell the people or the employees
Mhm.
what is the expected behaviour.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Or what is deemed as, accepted behaviour. So what happens when, for example, an executive or a manager doesn't follow those acceptable behaviour?
It's opens Pandora's box. So don't for one moment think that the people around you and below you as a manager don't see that happening. So what you're literally doing, what's literally happens is that they now have permission to do similar things.
Yes.
And their interpretation of what is a similar thing can be very divergent.
Yeah. Let's say now that this executive had a really good reason. So what are the consequences of the people, the employees, now labelling this person as suspicious, but maybe without having the right context of that situation? What's the impact to the organisation if
the misunderstanding, the miscategorization? Yeah. So, for instance, if there's something like, let's take an off-the-wall scenario that something is personal going on with that particular executive. Somebody in their family has suddenly got very, very sick. It's probably a useful thing to know that there is something going on.
Yeah. But you know how these things, sometimes it's private,
But at the same time, it is really the higher up you are in an organisation, the more white on rice you have to be about what it is, how you telegraph that, because no matter where you are in the higher ranks, you are mentor to somebody.
Yes, correct, that's true.
And there is a responsibility with that.
How does trust and rapport relate, or in a relationship, influence what is deemed as acceptable or suspicious behaviour?
So rapport is probably the biggest tool that you can have in understanding what is, if things are going off track. So for instance, if you have a really good rapport with somebody, you have a joke, you do this, but that rapport then becomes constrained. You'll know straight away when something, that conversation just didn't flow. What's happening?
Yes, yeah.
And that on a consistent basis, then you've got an idea that something's going on.
Yeah. So are there sort of effective strategies for organisations to help employees deem as what is, let's say, call it acceptable behaviour, but do it in a safety manner so they don't mislabel someone?
One of the most powerful tools you can have is an informal conversation. An informal conversation is great from a couple of perspectives. It actually takes the heat out of whatever it is you're going. You can sit down, I don't know, maybe have a cup of coffee, maybe have some lunch, this or the other, relax, and then ask some questions in a non-threatening way.
Yeah, so not throwing an email, because in an email you can have a lot of he-says.
Correct. And from a psychology point of view, people will slip up more in an informal situation as opposed to a formal situation. No, officer, I did not.
Yes, yeah.
No, mate, don't think I did that. So those kinds of things are, an informal chat is a really useful thing. If then you feel you need to move into a bit more formal, then maybe bring somebody else in and start looking at what the effect might be.
Alrighty. So we come to the last question. What is the key takeaway, as always, about discussing this type of topic?
So, what's acceptable and what's suspicious? Acceptable is always going to be what is the norm. What are these? What is the as long as people are within the constraints of the boundaries of the organisation or of the system, and they are consistent in the way that they operate inside of that environment, then you've got acceptable behaviour on two levels. Suspicious behaviour starts when things change, when all of a sudden Lily rocks up in a Porsche and starts sprouting different facial hair and whatever.
Correct.
The designer Italian leather suits, then that might be suspicious behaviour.
Yes, correct.
So these are the sorts of things, I mean, I'm being very overt here.
Yes.
But those are the sorts of things that become suspicious behaviour when people move out of what they normally do.
Alrighty. I'm very suspicious of this video. With that, thank you very much. Stay tuned to the next video. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
And cheers.
Cheers.